Hello gorgeous people, today I am doing a review of the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural palette. I'm going to do this review a little bit differently. I've tested all of the shades, I filmed a whole bunch of demos, and I'm going to put the demos up and talk about the individual shades as I go through them. Here comes Miss Frey. You open the door. We need to teach you how to close the door. Do you want to say hello? Oh, yes. Little bit of info on the palette before we get into the demos. So it is a 20 pan eyeshadow palette. There are 10 mattes, 10 beautiful like sparkly shimmer shades. They're really gorgeous. This is version 2.0. So they have released a palette called the Nearly Natural in the past. It has been discontinued and now they have revamped it. I do not have the original palette, so I won't be comparing them. If you want a comparison, Kat filmed one. I will leave a link to her video in the description box. So like I said, 20 shades. The pans are slightly smaller than a standard eyeshadow pan, which I personally really like. They contain 1 gram of product each, so 20 grams across the palette. There is a nice big mirror in there and it retails for 85 Australian dollars. It's available on their website now. Let's jump into some demos. So for the first look, I used Barely There in the crease. It's a nice like neutral brown shade, very, very wearable for me. What I love about the formula of a lot of these mattes, not all of them, but a lot of them, they're very creamy, but their pigmentation is not huge straight off the bat. So you have a lot of control with how much you can apply. If you want a more intense pigmented eyeshadow color that really pops off the skin, you can totally have that just by building it up. But if you want a more subtle, soft color, you can get that straight off the bat. They're really easy to blend and they're not patchy. In the outer corner, I used Untouched. This is a really beautiful kind of mauvey-ish brown. It's like a medium color. Again, I feel like these, like the swatches don't do these justice. They apply really smoothly. They blend with each other really, really well. And if you're trying to create like a soft gradient, I'm actually using this duo in my crease in my outer corner today. You can very, very easily apply small amounts of these eyeshadows to sort of gradiate those shades into each other without having to blend for like 3 or 4 minutes. And for someone who doesn't want to spend, you know, half an hour or 20 minutes doing an eye look, I appreciate that. That's what I look for in matte eyeshadows these days. I then applied Naked Eye. This is really pretty. Something that I've noticed with all of these eyeshadows, or the shimmery eyeshadows, is that they seem to have, you know, their base color and then like the same sort of sparkly, I guess, effect to them. It's this really pretty silver, very light reflective. It lightens things up, it brightens things. This one has like a pale pinky nude, but it's quite transparent on the skin. And then I went in with Sultry over like the center of the lid. I think Sultry might be my favorite shade. It's the one that I'm wearing today. It's, you know, a nice sort of pink mauvey-ish nude shade. The sparkle, again, you've got that really pretty like sort of silvery twinkly effect, which is really nice. I finished off the look with mascara, lashes, liquid liner, and on the lower lash line I applied some more of the Barely There shade. For look number 2, I started with Solace in the crease. As you can see, this is very, very light. It has a sort of mauvey-ish grayish tint to it. It's very pretty, but again, it is a super light shade. I think if you have super fair skin, this is gonna work as like almost like bringing a shadow back to a blanked out eye, which I think it's a cool shade. It's probably a little bit light for me. Once I build it up, it does give the effect of like you know, a shadow, which I quite like. In my personal opinion, just for me personally, this could be a little bit more pigmented because it does require a fair bit of building for me to get that effect. But honestly, I'd prefer to have to build an eyeshadow rather than being overwhelmed by it anyway. Over the mobile lid, I used the shade Stripped Back. This is a pretty like purple shade. Again, it's got that sort of silvery, twinkly reflect to it. I think it's really pretty. These shades, these shimmery shades, they're not creamy, but they've got a lot of their own like natural grip, which is really good. So they adhere to the eye really well. If you want to get that metallic effect, you can totally like buff it on with a finger. I find applying it with a brush gives more of that twinkle, which I really like. And to play around with some of the darker shades, I took the shade Naturally and I applied that as a liner. This shade is gorgeous. I love it. As you can see there, it's very, very pigmented. The darker shades have that intensity and richness of pigment, which I think is appropriate and not necessarily needed across the whole palette with all the mattes. So when you're talking about the lighter shades, you have a lot of control over the color depth that you get out of them. But these darker shades just do their job straight off the bat. They're also really smooth and they apply beautifully. They're not dry. Naturally does feel a little bit drier in the pan, but you can see there it applies like a dream. And you'll be able to see in the demo that applying it with a really like fine tipped wing liner brush, it goes on beautifully. There's no patchiness. It's smooth. It's almost like using a gel liner. Not quite as smooth as a gel liner, but like the pigmentation and the formula, the smoothness of the formula really lends itself to doing things like this where you would use a powder as a liner. To finish the look, I put on mascara, lashes. I also took a little bit of Stripped Back and put that in my inner corner. And then I took a little bit more of the Naturally shade and I put that just on my lower lash line on the outer corners, very lightly, tiny little brush. You can see there how it sort of blends out to a bit more of like a, you know, a reddish, like a dark reddish color, which is really pretty. I love it. For look number 3, I started with Serene, and this one went in like my crease and my outer corner. I felt like this looked a little bit bruisey when it was sort of being blended onto the eye just as a color on its own. So I wouldn't use this as a one and done on myself. I just think it clashes with my skin coloring a tiny bit. But when I bought other shades in, it looked a lot better. But it's beautiful. It's very smooth. You can see there it's got, you know, some nice cool undertones. I went over the majority of my mobile lid with the shade New Nude. It's a yellowy gold. It didn't really have the sparkle that I was looking for, that I'd kind of got used to with some of the other shades that I'd used in the palette, and I wanted to bring back some like extra warmth. So I went in with Second Skin just over like the center of the eyelid, and this one is a really beautiful like bronzy gold shade, very, very pretty. Again, not a huge amount of twinkle in this one. I would say New Nude and Second Skin, and there's another one in the palette called Unveiled. It's a pink shade, which I'll talk about soon. Doesn't have as much sparkle. I really love the sparkle. For me, that's like, I just think it's so, so pretty. Like that nice little like twinkliness when the light hits it. So these two shades, not really my faves. I think they're appropriate in the palette to sort of make the palette a whole. And I also definitely think that pairing it with Serene was not the ideal color for my personal like coloring. There are better shades in the palette that I could definitely use to make these colors pop more. To give this look a bit more dimension, I went in with Untouched just on the outer corner, and I applied Naked Eye on the inner corner to bring some twinkle, because I was missing the twinkliness of the shades. And you can probably see there how this one, I guess on camera, it's looking a bit more metallic. I don't know how well it's really picking up the twinkliness, but I feel like you can see like the difference in the light reflection. These are still very metallic, very pretty shades, but there are shades in the palette that just, they reflect and bounce the light at a much more like intense degree, and that's where my love lies. To finish the look, I just put on mascara, no lashes with this one. I used a little bit of Serene on the lower outer corner lash line. For look 4, I started with the shade Pure. Now, Pure is very, very, very light. I was kind of hoping that I could use this as like a skin tone shade to sort of set my eyeshadow primer. I usually use the shade 328 from Inglot, which is pretty much like a spot on match for my skin. A little bit off, but it's really close. But this is much, much lighter than that. I would consider this a matte highlight. So I actually went over this with more of my Inglot shade just to soften it up a bit, because it was very, it's very, very light. Now that threw me off a bit, and I wasn't really sure where I was going to go with the look, but I decided to soldier on with my original idea. The next shade that I took was Disrobe. This one I put, I picked it up with my brush, so I did my dip with my brush. It's a dark shade, and based on how I'd used the palette so far, I knew that the darker shades typically are very rich in pigment. So I put a little bit on one outer corner, and then I took that brush without re-dipping, and I was able to apply the same amount of product to the other eye in the outer corner. Then I took a clean eyeshadow brush, something smaller, and I just started to blend this shade to sort of get an idea of how far these more pigmented shades can go. Because what I knew from the lighter shades was that they blend really well, and they blend quite far. So even though they're not super, super pigmented, they still can go really far, and you get that really beautiful like natural wash of color. It just looks smooth and blended and seamless, and I really love that about the lighter matte shades. It's like one of my favorite things about the palette. So I wanted to see how far these darker shades could go in their blending, and they blend really, really well. They're very similar in the way that the lighter shades blend, like they can go really, really far. They blend really smoothly. You don't get that like patchiness or like gripping. So I basically just blended that Disrobe shade into my outer corner and up into my crease until I was happy with it. And then I went in with the shade Nearly Natural. So this is a really beautiful like twinkly rosy shade. This shade and Sultry are like my faves from the palette, and I see them getting used a lot. They're very, very pretty. And once I had that shade on, I then went back and sort of finessed with the Disrobe shade. So it was a little bit more blending, sort of bringing that color into the Nearly Natural shade and just making it look, you know, seamless. I didn't put on any liner with this look. I did put on mascara, but no lashes. Personally, when I'm using dark shades like Disrobe, I would always wear some false lashes, simply because I feel that it helps to sort of open my eyes and elongate them a little bit, so it's a bit more supportive for those darker shades. But I also want to show you guys just how it looks sort of, you know, as is. For look number 5, I wanted to use these sort of earthy green tones, so I started the look with Essence in my crease. This is a beautiful like yellowy mustard shade, blends beautifully, absolutely, like it's gorgeous. You guys know that these aren't typically my favorite shades to wear, but this look was so easy to put together and they all just blended really nicely. In my outer corner, I put the shade Down to Earth. This is kind of like a dirty mossy green shade, not too dark, but dark enough still to offer some definition to a look. Again, if you build it up and concentrate it in a certain area, it's going to look darker. Again, gorgeous shade, so easy to blend. And then over my eyelid, I took the shade Exposed. This is pretty. You can see there, it's got a little bit of a duochrome hint. To finish this look off, I did use liner and lashes. And on the lower lash line, I took a little bit of both Essence and Down to Earth. I put Essence sort of in this inner section of my lower lash line, and I put Down to Earth in the outer section, and I just blended them together. Beautiful look. Like I said, I'm not really a green eyeshadow person, but I felt like these were very easy to wear, and I think that they actually complemented my skin fairly well. I did pair it with a red lipstick, which was pretty bold, but I liked it. I thought it was really nice. For look number 6, I was faced with a little bit of a conundrum. So I had 4 shades to use. I had Unveiled, Raw, Smolder, and Cinder. Since these shades kind of fall into similar categories and I wasn't sure how to bring them all into a look, I decided to do a split eye for each look. So on the first eye, I took Unveiled and I just put that all over the lid. It's you can see there, it's kind of like a Barbie pink shade, but it's got a lot of silvery reflect. It's not very twinkly on the eye though. So it's more, I would say it's more like you get more out of it. If you sort of buff it in, you get a bit more of a metallic effect. On the other eye, I took this shade, which is Raw, and this is beautiful. It's kind of like a rosy bronze. Again, not a whole lot of that like twinkle, which I love from a lot of the other shades, but still very, very pretty. And then I use the black shades as liners. So on the side with Unveiled, I took the matte black. This one is Cinder, and look at that. That is so incredibly pigmented. It's like crazy. I did get a tiny bit of fallout. That is completely normal when doing stuff like this. If you use any eyeshadow as an eyeliner, that is a risky run. For me, it was fine. I just you know, tidied it up before I then went in to do my base. It is so pigmented and smooth. It is really easy to use this shade as an eyeliner. Then I took the shade Smolder, which is the like sparkly black shade, and I used that on the other eye. Now, apparently this is a new formula from Glaminatrix. You can see how beautiful and sparkly that is. It's very pigmented. Again, like these are not to be messed with. Do not pick up a lot of this on your brush. It will overtake a look. It is like both of these black eyeshadows are intensely pigmented. So this Smolder shade, which is meant to be a new formula, it kind of has a creaminess to it. You can feel it a little bit in the pan when you put your finger in there, but when you apply it, like you can feel the sort of creaminess and the smoothness of the shade. Again, this, God, it applies so beautifully as a liner, and the effect that it gives is really fun and interesting. It looks like you have a black glittery like gel liner on your eye. It's gorgeous. With this side, I did get a little bit of fallout, and the downside is that there is shimmer in it. So that's a little bit, or like, you know, a micro sparkly glitter kind of finish. So it is a little bit more difficult to sort of clean up, because you're not just cleaning up pigment, you're also trying to clean up a little bit of sparkle. If you want a tip for that, like for starters, don't apply your base, do your eyes first. And then if you put on a primer or you've got like just moisturizer or something on, take that same product that you last put on your skin, put it on like a Q-tip or a cotton pad and just wipe it off. But I did also take my Victoria Beckham Bordeaux pencil liner and I blended a little bit of that on my lower lash line, because I think red and black look beautiful together. Now I do have one thing that I need to say about these black shades as liners. As I wore them throughout the day, they transferred. Both of them transferred up onto my brow bone. Now I do have deep set eyes, so as I'm sort of going about my life throughout the day, if I'm wearing something that's really pigmented and it's dark and it's along the lower lash line and it's not like, sorry, along the upper lash line and it's not sort of locked in and really set there, it will transfer. So this goes for, you know, crappy eyeliners, mascara, and these eyeshadows. So these eyeshadows did sort of transfer all the way along my brow bone on both sides. So they are very pigmented and they can transfer. So I think that's something to be aware of. I probably, look, Cinder, the matte black, I'm not really sure that I would bother using it as a liner, simply because I have a million of them in liquid form. It's not really necessary for me to use it. But Smolder is different. I don't have anything like this in my stash that has quite this like intensity of color and this beautiful sparkle that is just so apparent. Like the pigment, the black pigment of the eyeshadow itself doesn't mute the silver sparkliness that's in there. And I just love that. It's sensational. So I would use this only as an eyeliner. There's not really any other way that I would use it, because I don't use black eyeshadow. It's too much. My eyes are too small and too deep set for this stuff. But as an eyeliner, it's sensational. So I personally want to play around with it a little bit more. I'm thinking, you know, decanting a tiny bit and mixing it with Duraline might help it to hold in place and not transfer. But yeah, this particular shade was the big surprise for me. It's very unique, and just like, look at the sparkle that comes off that. It's sensational. So thoughts overall of the palette is I really like it, but I will say, I think where my love lies with this palette, I'm still covered in swatches. My love lies with this palette is probably like, you know, these sort of metallic-y shades. These mattes here are my favorite. These ones I would use, but probably very rarely, simply because it's not a color that I typically gravitate towards. Naturally and Disrobe are also really beautiful. There's a lot in the palette that I would use. I think what I find difficult to use would be Cinder and Pure, and some of these shimmery shades like Second Skin, Raw, and Unveiled, they're just a little bit, oh, and New Nude, just a little bit like, I don't know, when I compare them to the really sparkly, beautiful ones, I just think they're a bit bland, unfortunately. And I'm not saying that to say like the eyeshadows are bad. It's just my personal preference and like what I look for in eyeshadows these days. I just love twinkle. I just love it. Give me the sparkliness. I'm like a bird. I'm looking for little bits of, you know, sparkly pretty things that catch my eye for my nest. But in saying that, all of the eyeshadows perform really well. There's no formula duds in here. They're pigmented and rich and intense where they should be, and they are delicate and buildable and blend beautifully where it's really, really important. All of the shimmery shades have really good grip. They adhere to the eye well, not really Fallout City either, even though they have that sort of, you know, sparkly formula to them. Often when those sort of eyeshadows are too dry, you start to get like fallout when you're applying them. You don't really get that with this palette. A little bit of fallout here and there, but it's nothing compared to things that I've tried in the past. They've got just the right formula to like get on the skin, adhere to the skin, blend easily, and apply like in an even layer. They don't sort of chunk up or anything like that, which is really nice. But all in all, I actually think the mattes are the big winner in this palette. I think that the shimmers are really, really important and they're really, really beautiful. But I think the thing that really surprised me was how beautiful the mattes are in this palette. I just really, really enjoy the formula. I think they're easy to use, they're easy to blend. It's just mwah, chef's kiss. And I'm not just saying that because a brand sent it to me. I think even if I had paid $85 to get this palette, I would still be really, really happy with it. I am going to put the palette to bed for a little while. I've got to give it a rest because I've got to get back to testing out my like eyeshadow palettes for my testing series. But I'm looking forward to coming back to this palette. If I wasn't doing that series, I would just stick with this palette probably for like the next few weeks minimum, just playing around with the different like, you know, color combos and stuff like that, because there's a lot in here. The palette really packs a punch. Because the pans are a little bit smaller than a normal size eyeshadow pan, they fit a lot in here, so it's going to keep you busy for quite a while. This one gets a tick of approval from me. I really like it. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Leave your comments down below if you've tried this palette, maybe you pre-ordered it, maybe you have the original one. Like, let me know your thoughts. Are you going to get this one even if you have the original one? I know they're different. I watched Kat's review. I also really like that they made them different. I think that's appropriate. But anyway, I don't have the original, so I'm not really going to touch on it any more than that. I want to say a massive thank you to my channel members. I love you guys all so much. Thank you for joining me today, and I will catch you in the next one. Oh, and thank you to Glaminatrix for sending me the palette. Bye.